Welcome, everybody, to the very first, what's been a long time coming,
Yes.
inaugural episode of Some Real Talk with the Reeds, Kansas City's newest and, of course, best real estate-related podcast. I'm your host, Reno Reed of the Reed team with Chartwell Realty in beautiful Kansas City with my co-host. They say the devil works hard, but she works far harder. Sandy, how are you doing?
I am doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing great. How's your week been? Anything exciting going on?
It has been an exciting week. We've gotten a couple houses under contract, and we've got a new listing that you're doing an open house on today that will go very quickly. And we've got a couple more houses coming on the market in the next week or so. So it's been a good week.
Yeah, it has. Have you done anything exciting of the week outside of the work?
Not really. I mean, we just came back from vacation, and so now it's like we work hard, we play hard. So so now it's work hard.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of getting back into the routine after I know we've both taken a number of vacations, fairly lengthy vacations at that.
Yes.
In the earlier parts of the year, and kind of getting back into the routine is not necessarily the smoothest transition, especially because we work kind of so far in advance, as opposed, they say typically a couple months at least.
Yes.
From what you do today is what's going to pay off in a couple months.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not that we don't work when we're on vacation either. So it's just that there's certain times of the year that it's easier for a real estate agent to take. We've got some natural downtimes in the market. Usually the first part of the year, August, September, and then getting into December. Those are kind of the times when we try to take our vacations, so it has the least impact on our clients. But by the same token, that's why we have a team, is so that if you're on vacation, myself, we've got 7 on a team, so we can all cover for each other, and our clients are still getting the best representation that they can, and never have to feel that they're lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I know this year's been kind of weird with kind of the weather. The weather in the Midwest is just sporadic to begin with, but it's been extra weird this year. So we've had blizzards in March, we've had snow in April. I mean, the weather this week has been kind of crazy too.
Yeah, they may even be able to hear the howling wind outside. And real estate, sometimes that follows the trend of the weather. So if we have a really, really early spring, the spring season seems to start. I mean, sometimes in February it's like boom, but now we're getting into the mid-April, and we're finally getting blooms on the trees and stuff. And so I think that real estate kind of follows that trend to some degree.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely does. So for everyone who's new to the podcast, which is everybody, including us, we're trying out where it's kind of a little bit looser, having it be less scripted, more off the cuff, just kind of more our personality. And so we've got a couple topics that we have today. The first one is at the beginning of the month, I think it was Realtor.com did an article about the top 20 fastest growing markets in real estate in the country. And a couple of them are really close to home. So specifically on the Missouri side, there was Columbia, which is home of Mizzou, the University of Missouri. And then on the Kansas side is Topeka, the capital of Kansas.
Right. And it's interesting that it's not the biggest cities that are seeing the growth, but they're the most centrally located, I would say.
Yeah.
With Columbia being halfway between Kansas City and St. Louis, and Topeka being close distance to Kansas City, but also proximity to Wichita, Hutchinson, and things like that, and being the state capital. That makes sense, a little bit more. And it has been that, and to some degree, it may be that it's taken a little longer for those markets to take hold.
Right.
And so there's still more affordability there, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I know whenever I'm in the car, if I'm not on the phone, I'm listening to music or I'm listening to talk radio. There's really no in between. And I remember a couple years back that they did an article. They were talking about how Topeka was testing out the idea of financially incentivizing people to move to Topeka because they were just bleeding people for so long. And I do have to wonder if some of that is kind of some return on, I guess, for lack of a better word, that investment, because Topeka is a big city. It's got buildings, it's got government.
It's not tumbleweeds.
Right.
Like I think some people think Kansas is just tumbleweeds and corn or wheat fields.
Yeah, and so I mean it's a lot of, I guess, business heavy areas, and of course government heavy areas, because that's where the state capital is. And so having the ability to have people there and fill those jobs, especially in an economic recession that we saw in the very early stages of 2020, I think that might have been a huge kind of driving factor behind people getting into those markets. And like you said, affordability, as people start being able to work from home, some of the more affordable markets are a lot more appealing, especially because it's, again, centrally located. It's got easy access to both Kansas City, to Wichita, kind of the two big cities
Right.
of Kansas.
And easy
bigger.
access to airports too.
Yeah.
Because for those people who maybe have to, their job is out of California or someplace, and they have to occasionally hop on a plane. It's still so much more affordable to live in the Midwest than it is in California and most of your outlying coastal states. That it gives them the freedom to do that. And I think a little bit has to do with just the COVID in general, that I think a lot of people realized that life is short and that being close to family, because a lot of people grow up in the Midwest and they move out, and I'm seeing a real influx of them coming back closer to home. And some of it could be taking care of their elderly parents, their grandparents, things like that. I think it's like a multifaceted reason why people are moving back.
Well, I certainly think that some of the economic issues in areas like California, where you're paying $7 a gallon for gas, just these places that are just so much just tremendously expensive compared to, even at our worst, the Midwest is still extremely affordable.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can get an amazing lakefront house for what you can get like a 1-bedroom condo in LA or San Francisco.
Right.
So even at the most expensive end of it, it's still a really affordable place to live. I think one of the other things with Columbia specifically is it is a big college town, and so they do a lot of medical stuff, and they have a lot of other jobs that are
veterinarian and
Right.
yeah, it's a big hub for ag science and all of those things that are really it's always been important, but you're hearing about them in the news more, and as we as a nation and as a world are trying to curb a bunch of different issues and becoming forefront leaders in technology.
Right, and I think with Columbia having a huge university that does a wide variety of different, that's really good programs, you get a lot of research, and you have a lot of things that are kind of tied to those industries, and so a lot of people are coming into those areas, and then also as it gets bigger, you have a more and more need for those type of jobs.
Right.
So how do you think, because Kansas City's in a kind of more or less the middle of both of them, they're both, depending on where you are, hour and a half, 2 hours away, how do you think that these growing markets are going to impact Kansas City closer to home?
I think that a couple of different things. I think the the outlying cities, Oak Grove, Odessa, Bonner Springs, places like that, Miami County in Kansas, where people can, I think that if they're working there and coming back and forth, if they've been living in places where they've had large commutes with heavy traffic,
Right.
even an hour and a half commute without that traffic would have to be a breeze compared to where they're at. And I think that the outlying areas, because they have some more land and a little bit more breathing room, I think they are going to benefit as this trend continues. And Kansas City is doing a lot of wonderful things to regentrify neighborhoods and things like that. A lot of that, so they've had their own internal growth already. Now I think that these outskirts are going to probably reap the benefit of some of that as well.
Yeah, the way I kind of always look at it is almost like a donut. So like at the very center, it's just the great location. It's established. That kind of area is usually pretty expensive. And then the dough of the donut, as it moves farther away, that's where they start doing all the new work in terms of community building. I know places like Lee Summit, they're seeing a lot of new construction and things of that nature, because as you get closer to the interior of the city, that's more or less already been done.
Right.
So it's going to slowly kind of move out, and so that causes the newer properties, again, towards the outer edges of the donut, to be a little bit more expensive than kind of the center hole of it, with the exception of the very dead center. So I think what's going to happen, this isn't going to be anytime soon because they're so far away and there's just so much land to still develop. But at some point, you're going to see the two donuts meet to make a super donut. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be something that's really going to happen. But I think it's going to happen slowly. Like you said, the surrounding areas of both Columbia and Topeka, the areas that I think that are really interesting to me to see where they're going to be very soon are on the Kansas side, Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh, absolutely.
Which essentially is the Columbia of Kansas, and on the Missouri side, the Topeka of Missouri is Jefferson City. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of parallels between the two of those places on the respective sides that I wouldn't be surprised, and because they're both a little closer than Kansas City is.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see in the near future Lawrence to really start popping off, or Jeff City to start having a ton of interest, because again, even an hour drive is better than an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, and it's still an area where there is things to do. Some people love the country, some people love just having their space, everyone leaves them alone, but there's a lot of people that love that aspect and feel of community.
Right.
And so I think those two areas are going to be probably the next that I would keep my eyes on.
Well, and you talk about those commutes, like Lee Summit has become a really popular place for people who work out at Whiteman Air. Mm-hmm. They still have, or Warrensburg, both. They still have, an hour drive or something like mm-hmm. that, but they've got more nightlife and things like that. So I don't think for a lot of people that hour commute, if you don't have the traffic like mm-hmm. You're not driving the inner city loops and things like that. For a lot of people, that's where they decompress coming and going.
Yeah, and especially having kind of, as opposed to your traditional traffic that's like going into downtown.
Right.
You're kind of going the opposite way, so theoretically it's a lot less
both sides.
Dense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think
agree.
that helps quite a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other thoughts.
I think we've covered that pretty good. And because we kind of both go squirrel, we're really trying to stay on topic today. So what is the next topic?
Well, this is attempt number 2. And the reason it's attempt number 2 is because we went to squirrel.
Exactly.
And we took up a lot of time, and my memory card did not like that. So
yeah.
The next topic, I've seen a growing, trend on TikTok and Twitter about people talking about red flags. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept, it's kind of these little instances that you're like, how did I not see the signs? How did I not see the warnings? How did I not see this coming? And it's typically in kind of like the dating or interpersonal spheres, sometimes in businesses as well as a company. So I thought it'd be really fun to take that and kind of use it as a real estate means. So red flags to kind of look out for if you're, looking for an agent, if you're looking at particular properties, if you're looking at houses, photos, things like that online. So red flags in real estate, and to keep in mind, a lot of these are more yellow, orange, kind of gray. They're not hard, fast rules, right?
Right, but just things to keep in mind that could potentially affect your transaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so more or less kind of raising questions that should raise questions in your mind, whether they're not they're massive deal breakers or not is completely up to you. But these are just kind of things that I would personally, and you would personally,
absolutely
look out for during the process.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you get us started?
If I were on the buy or the sell side, probably the first thing I would ask is kind of a twofold. Are you a full-time real estate agent? Mm-hmm. And how long have you been in business? How many houses have you sold? Mm-hmm. Everybody starts it at some place. Mm-hmm. And, you were a part-time agent for a time and there's nothing wrong with a part-time agent. But if they are a part-time agent, does their 9 to 5 keep them from being able to service you if you need mm-hmm. help during that 9 to 5? Or what kind of background, what other help do they have? And if they've only sold, 2 or 3 houses and you get into a situation where it gets a little dicey, because real estate can be messy. There's no two ways about
Absolutely.
it. If they don't have that experience, how are they going to handle that with you? And are you going to be, is it going to create frustrations where our job is to be their advocate and, frustrations happen, but it's our job to try to minimize those.
Right.
And if you're doing, everybody likes to support a family member that's starting out and things like that. But there's sometimes when that can almost ruin a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be my first thing that I would suggest to people. Just be cognitive of that.
And everyone has their own experiences. I'm pretty young. I'm a second generation agent, so I've had kind of a lifetime of secondhand experience, whereas that's kind of a benefit to me. But
don't kid yourself. You were putting out door knockers and signs at a rather young age. So
yeah, don't let the child labor law people hear about that.
No.
But from a part-time agent's perspective, there's a lot of more flexibility in jobs. Honestly, because of COVID. So a lot of people have more flexibility in their work. A lot of jobs are less, you're at your desk 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Right.
They give you some flexibility that, as long as you're working your hours, you're getting your job done, I don't care. So, there is definitely some wiggle room in that. But like she said, the experience and honestly the resources, like we mentioned kind of in the past, we have a team. So if we have a new agent, for example, that's part-time, just started out, if they don't know the answer to the question or they have, issues come up, they have, if it's a new agent, they have 7 people to bounce it off of. And so those are really good resources to have as well. So these are just kind of some things to keep in mind,
right,
especially with those part-time agents.
And if you are a night worker and you have to work during the day, make sure that the person that that they can work your schedule to a degree. We're not going to show houses we can't show houses at 3:00 in the morning. That just is not a thing to do. But just make sure that that you sync and you're in line and that you kind of like each other too. That's another part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess that kind of leads into my first red flag. So if you're a potential client, like if you just know one of us and you're like, hey, I'm going to use them, cool. That's awesome.
That's what you should do.
That's what you should absolutely do. But if you don't have those connections already, it's a good idea to go ahead and talk to my typical answer for bids, for anything, quotes, always talk to at least 3 people. So while you're talking to these agents, you have a specific set of needs, right? Your situation might not be the same as someone else. You're a unique individual with unique circumstances. So if when they're talking about why you should use them, if they're not talking to your specific needs, that to me is, a big question mark. So if you're a buyer, for example, a first-time home buyer, and you're like, this is kind of my situation, I might talk to the fact that in my years of being an agent, 90% of my buyers have been first-time home buyers. So that's not necessarily a given, but that gives me the opportunity to talk to, the process, understanding the process, the emotions, and kind of having the experience to kind of, circumvent it and calm the waters during the whole process. But if someone's just like, yeah, I just do a lot of business, I'm amazing, pat me on the back, make you, try to make you think they're just amazing, but they don't really talk to your needs. To me, that's a really big and honestly kind of concerning aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. And different business models work differently. I think, and I hate to keep going back to COVID, but we've realized that with COVID, I think if something good came out of it, I think is that we're more on a little more personal level.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
There are still some agents that it's more about, these are my statistics. This is wonderful. I'm a wonderful person, but getting a job done doesn't necessarily, if they have a bunch of assistants, as an example, you might see them, then they have a showing agent. Somebody's showing agent shows his houses, then you come back to negotiate. But then you don't have the same person to do it all the way through.
Right.
And they can sell more houses because they're not doing it all the way through.
Right.
Which for some people that's okay. But if you want that same person, it just kind of, it goes back to that really understanding the person that you're hiring, because you're signing a contract 99% of the time you are hiring that person.
Yeah.
And it's not the easiest thing in the world to get out of a buyer's agency or a seller's agency agreement in some companies. our company operates a little bit different, and if we can't find a way to work together, we let you go. But there are companies that will not do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of going off that point is like, if that system of having, a bunch of different people, a bunch of different like hands in the pie, for a lack of a better term, I don't even know if that's the right analogy.
No, I know what you mean.
But if that's fine for you, then by all means, go ahead and use them. This isn't a knock on anybody in specific.
No.
This isn't a knock on, specific business models. But you as an individual have your needs. What are the things that are important to you? And then how is the person on the other side of the table going to help you fulfill your wants and your needs, especially like in a situation if you're a buyer, again, just because right now it's a lot easier to sell than it is to buy. Specifically, what are some of the problems that we're going to see that come up naturally, especially in a seller's market with a ton of competition on the buying side? What are some ways that we can kind of approach this problem, honestly, from a problem-solving perspective?
Absolutely. And that kind of, I think, dovetails into another red flag that we've been talking about is if you're, and this applies more to buyers because it is such a competitive market, if your agent is telling you, oh, they aren't going to pay for a home warranty, don't worry about that. Or they're not going to do this because they really don't know they're going to do it.
Right.
And are they working more towards just trying to get you into a house as opposed to getting you into the right situation? Because there are times when a home warranty, as an example, is very important, depending upon the age of the mechanicals and things like that. And we're seeing a lot of people paying over asking, which that's kind of the market right now. But then appraisal gaps. If we have a recession, what is that going to look like for you? Is this a house you're going to be in for 10, 15 years? You're probably okay. If this is a 5-year plan, you have to just make sure they're thinking the way you're thinking.
Right. It's important because, again, your agent, whether you're on the buying side or the selling side, their job is to represent you in your best interest and do what is in your best interest. If you're going to be in a place for, 2 years until your child begins school and you want to move to a different area, this is just a temporary thing. And they're saying, yeah, go ahead and do an appraisal waiver. Like she mentioned, if there's a recession that comes along, an appraisal waiver is basically you saying, I'm going to pay more than this house is worth, period, because I want this house. If a recession hits, whether a recession hits or not, you start with negative equity.
Right.
That's not exactly
assuming how much money you've put into it, and
right.
Well, even if you put paid cash for it, you're going to be in a little bit of a negative equity position.
Right.
And we can't tell. It's the real estate market's a lot like the stock market. You have people that think they know what might be happening, but it changes.
It's all speculative.
It is. Any Ukrainian conflict, supply chain issues, all these things all affect everything. And real estate is no different. I wish I had a crystal ball because I'd be a rich woman.
Yeah. But it's basically just to say, make sure they're thinking of your best interest and not just, okay, this person needs a house, I want to put them in there. Because a lot of the practices that we're seeing, so that people can become competitive, waiving inspections, appraisal waivers, not even considering a home warranty. Like, yes, those are all areas that you can kind of waive to try to get some extra leverage. And
you can always buy a home warranty. That's the one thing you can pay for yourself. Not having an inspection doesn't. I don't know if you remember the movie years and years ago, The Money Pit. That's the house. It was that's like super over the top, but you don't know what you can't see, or you're not a specialist.
Right. And
that's probably the thing that makes me the craziest the most is the people who volunteer to waive the inspection. Even if you're not, just because it's good knowledge.
Yeah.
You want to know that, that your roof is going to be insurable because because you worked in the insurance industry, sometimes the insurance companies don't get out to your house to actually look at it till after the transaction's closed. And that's not the time you want to go and find out that, oh, by the way, we're not going to insure that roof because it's too old.
Right.
Yeah. And I have had that happen with a client before.
So needless to say is like, you want to make sure that they're thinking of your best interest. And while you do want the house as a buyer, and you do want to do what you can, and that you're comfortable with, of course, to get yourself in a position to where you can win a house, make sure that they're at least explaining to you the things that you're going around doing. Because we are starting to see some of these clients that, they didn't tell me about a home warranty, and, my water heater crapped out, my air conditioning stopped working. And they're coming back after, people just because they weren't representing their best interest. Mm-hmm. Even if it's something that you weren't going to do regardless, it's important information for us to share with you.
Absolutely.
I think we're getting close to the end of our time, so I've got one last one. This
okay.
isn't necessarily, again, it's not necessarily given, but if you walk into a house and everything is all gray, LVP, gray paint on the walls, while that's in style, that to me as a buyer's agent screams, this is a flip, especially if there's new paint on everything.
And no furniture.
Right. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's a great business model.
It's a gray area.
It's a great business model for people to have. But it does raise questions because they obviously, if they're trying to sell it, they're trying to make a profit. Why did they get the property so low in terms of price? And why are they trying to sell it so high? And so a lot of that time, they're just, paint, new floor, get it on the market. But sometimes there's some deeper issues. So that, again, it's not necessarily a red flag per se,
right.
But it definitely is cause for us to kind of get our magnifying glass out and kind of look a little bit more thoroughly at the property.
There could have been a foundation issue, and that's why they got it cheaper, and they fixed it.
Right.
And that's okay. It's just, you look at it a little bit closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more room for scrutiny in that kind of instance, I feel like, especially because, like you said, there's a number of things that can be wrong with a house. And the fact that a lot of people just try to get in for cheap and then do as little work as possible and sell it for the most amount of money, that's natural. That's just that's capitalism, baby. That's capitalism, baby. But that's not necessarily the best thing for you if they're not doing quality work.
Correct.
If they're doing it all themselves and they really don't know what they're doing, if the work's shoddy, these are all situations that can come back to bite you.
Agreed. Just keep your eye out. Just be smart and have a good agent.
Yeah. And if you need a good agent, you know exactly who to call. The Reeds. So I hope you guys all had a great time, learned a little bit of something, maybe shared a laugh or two over your morning coffee, clapped like a seal at your cubicle when I introduced my lovely co-host of Sandy Reed of the Reed team. And until next time, we will see you again for some more Real Talk.